Welcome to the Mom CEO podcast. I'm your host, Esther Roach. Join me as we explore the dynamic intersection of motherhood and entrepreneurship. From the challenges to the triumphs, we're here to unravel it all. Get ready for insightful conversations, practical wisdom, and a whole lot of inspiration. Let's embark on this empowering journey together. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mom CEO podcast. I'm your host, Esther Roach, and today I'm joined by Rachel Strivelli. Hello, Rachel, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Esther. Happy to be here.
Now, thank you so much for coming on. If you'd like to introduce yourself to the audience, please, and tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Hi, so I am a growth coach and an intuitive guide, author of the book Talk to the Trees. And I actually got into entrepreneurship after I became a mom. I thought business was really interesting, but I was working as a teacher at the time. And then there I was sitting at home with my newborn baby and then 6-month-old baby. And when she was napping, which wasn't that often, I started reading about entrepreneurship online and listening to podcasts. And I couldn't get enough. I became almost obsessed. And so when my daughter was about 8 or 9 months old, I thought I want to start something for myself. And I interviewed for a nanny, and I just started out with 2 mornings a week. The nanny would come to our house. The woman also had her kid. She'd watch my daughter, and I'd lock myself in a room for 3 hours at a time. And I thought, okay, I'm just gonna start doing something for me because this is a passion. And motherhood, even though I really enjoyed it, intellectually it wasn't stimulating for me. And I thought, let me just pursue my passions and see where this goes.
Oh, fantastic. And you mentioned something interesting there, which is obviously, that stimulation, because sometimes I think in society there's a tendency of thinking, well, you can be a mom and then work and do everything. But at the same time, I'm the same as you. I couldn't just sit at home and just
Mm-hmm.
not do anything else. I just feel like my brain needs something, something,
Yes.
so it's absolutely fine, isn't it? What sort of things would you say to somebody who's in between that stage?
Hmm. Well, and here's the thing that has happened to me so many times throughout motherhood. I thought I would be a mom kind of like my mom because she was a stay-at-home mom and perfectly happy with it. She loved it. And she had 5 kids. I knew early on growing up in five, that was too many for me. And so it was, and I loved how my mom was a mom. And so I had to have the realization I can love being a mom and it can look totally different than it did for her because I have to do what's right for me, not just follow a model or follow a plan. Because when I was a stay-at-home mom, like that was what I had decided to do. And then when I decided to start doing business, that was a conversation with my husband and also a way of renewing my identity. And motherhood will bring that up for us in other ways. I found too. There are many times I thought, okay, I'm not the idealized mother I thought I would be in some ways, but I'm the mother who is doing the best that she can in the various ways that she is, and that's good enough. And I make my peace with that.
Oh, fantastic. And it's and again, another valuable thing that you add there about, doing what you can in the best possible way, because there's no formula, there's no module to say you've got to be a certain way. And I think there's a lot of pressure for, especially
Mm-hmm.
not even just the young moms, it's just moms in general. You're facing so many obstacles along the way, and it makes it so hard to kind of know what is right and what is wrong. So
Exactly.
yeah, so it's
Yes.
and I completely get you being in a household of five. I'm a mom of five myself, so my
Wow.
and I was one of five as well. So it's
Yeah.
like it didn't put me off, but it's that's how it's worked out, and it works well for us. So you've mentioned a few things on there, but you were a former environmental educator and a side.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
how how do you transition? Obviously, it was the factor of, having your daughter, who was your first child.
Mm-hmm.
Was there other elements that you felt, you could put your previous skills to use in some?
Mm, great question. Yes. And that was how I first made that segue, because I had a lot of knowledge of gardening. I had gone to grad school for soil science. I had been gardening at that point for about 10 years myself. And when I was a kid, we had an organic garden too. And I always was reading gardening books and listening to gardening podcasts. And I realized here's an area of knowledge that my friends will talk to me about, people ask me about, because everyone knows that I know about this. And so I simultaneously started to, there are more side hustles than a true business, because I was still just doing it when my daughter would go to either a mother's morning out or a 2 or 3 day morning drop off childcare. So I was mostly still a stay-at-home mom, and I was doing freelance, some editing, some social media content. And that I was just teaching myself the social media stuff on the go, because it was still so new that not many people knew what to do with it anyway. And then I was an organic garden coach. So people would come to my workshops where I taught them how to have an organic garden, how to care for the plants, how to deal with the pests. And then some people would hire me to come to their home and do a private garden consultation and help them decide where do they put the garden beds. And so it drew upon my previous knowledge. About a year into doing the garden coaching, I realized, similar to how when I was an educator, it wasn't always the content itself that got me very excited. It was working with people and seeing the excitement they had of trying something new, of feeling successful at it, of how do we work with fear to start something new, because there are always so many unknowns. And when you're a beginner, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And if you're not used to making mistakes, that can feel really uncomfortable. And so I realized all of the coaching elements that go into something new were what I really loved working with people on. And so then I stopped doing the freelancing, and I was organic garden coach and life coach simultaneously, because that allowed me to work with people in a way that still kept me feeling really excited. Because part of the balance I find is I didn't want any of it to feel, oh, I have to show up and do this now. Parenting had that feeling for me. I could only have so many areas of my life that had that feeling. And there are seasons where certain things might feel more like that than others. Then there turned to phases where probably business felt more like I love it and I have to show up. And parenting might have been the easier part. I find sometimes which part is the easier one, it ebbs and flows.
Yeah, it's interesting there that you've taken your existing skills, because I think that's another area that worries a lot of people making that transition or making that change, because you feel like you're wasting the experience that you
Mm,
previous, from your previous life, with all the different jobs that you may have done previously. But a lot of it seems to transfer to new things. And I think even being a mom,
yes.
you do
Yes.
certain things, things like patience. I think that's one
Yes.
really tested when you're a mom, and just
It's so true.
realize, isn't it? So it's nothing is valueless. You take it and use it in the next thing.
Mhm.
So with regards to, obviously now do you work more as a psychic coach, or are you,
Yes.
and how are you doing that? Can you just share with the audience what's,
Mm-hmm.
because I love that you mentioned, using the garden,
Mm-hmm.
that side of things. I love growing stuff myself. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting to just hear how you use that to actually help mothers that are confused to confident to
Mm-hmm.
next big leap.
Yes, yes, yes. And so I will say, I consistently follow my intuition. And as I said, there was a time where I was doing the organic garden coaching and the intuitive life coaching. And then at one point I decided to stop doing the garden coaching. And there was a part of me that thought, is this a waste? Am I giving something up that works really well? But there were also elements of it that weren't really fitting with how I wanted to show up. The patterns of success I saw other people doing for it, it didn't light me up. And so I let that go. But it's still, because I still garden, it informs the content that I write. So I don't specifically make here's how to grow a garden kind of post or articles or videos. And yet I talk about life in terms of planting seeds and pulling weeds. And so my knowledge of the natural world really influences how I work with people. And I find it also feels gentler for some people to pause and compare themselves to a tree and think about how a tree is being successful. And my book, Talk to the Trees, is looking at life pretty much through a tree's eyes. So how would a tree handle certain things? And and when we do that, the plants and the animals, they don't have self-judgment. They're just living their life. An oak tree's being an oak tree, um, a sunflower is being a sunflower, a rose bush is being a rose bush. They're not trying to be the other ones. And it really lets people drop the ideas of you have to do it a certain way and lets them start looking at what's true for me. Like, am I a rose bush who's trying to be an oak tree? And I'm going to always feel bad if I am. I'm going to never measure up because the rose bush is maybe going to get 8 feet tall max, and the oak tree is going to be 80 feet tall. And so inevitably, if we're not careful, we start measuring ourselves by standards of other people. And then if you're feeling bad, it's very hard to get up and go and have the motivation to push yourself when you're thinking, I'm not going to get there anyway. So what I find is if you can find the connection through nature if you want to, or if you pause to get to know yourself and listen to yourself and your own needs, and you recognize, okay, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and you truly work with those, then you can excel to the best way that you can, and it's unique to you.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant analogy with regards to the plants, and I love what you mentioned about, a sunflower is not trying to be a rose bush or an oak tree and stuff. And I think often in not just business, but in life in general, because there's a lot of judgment, isn't there? There's too much judging going on, and I think people turn up as not themselves because you want to fit in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's so true. And also, you may find this, and listeners may find, when you're ambitious, which I would call myself that, and a lot of people who come to work with me are too, you can also sometimes be judgmental because you want to push yourself. You have this motivation to do things. You're very interested in the world, and you're looking around, seeing all these other people having this great success. And but we have to remember, the people failing aren't shouting about it from the rooftops. You're not hearing that voice. And the people who are like, hey, I might be making it, I'm halfway making it, they're not shouting it from the rooftops either. And so the what you see and what you hear, it is, as people say, social media can be a highlight reel. And so when you look around, you can seem to think, oh, it's all successes out there. But that's just what we're seeing. It's not the only thing that's there.
Wow. And that's so true, because I do talk about that with, especially from social media. There's not many people, when you look at different things, there's not too many people that will show, especially from the business side, they won't show a lot of the issues that are happening. And sometimes we just see the success. You don't see the story or the journey. There's no real detail of how tough it can be sometimes when you're sort of getting on. And then
Mm-hmm.
the home side of things, you see the cleanest part, you know, and you don't see, you know, that when you have a home and you have children, it's particularly young children, you know, a home is a home. They're going to be there
Yes.
their time and doing whatever, but you see everything spotless, everything is like this, and it's not really the reality of what's going on. And is it a mask to cover up for certain things going and just to be fulfilling society's expectations? I don't know, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's easy if we forget that, yeah, some of the people on social media, you might only see the one clean section of their house. I'm not in the garage recording where there's noise and things all around, and we've all got that garage or the closet or the part of a room that it looks a mess. And I think I find if you remind yourself of these things, you can relax and think, yeah, I am doing the best for me. And and when you let yourself just use yourself as the standard
Yeah.
for how much you do and how you achieve, then it's so much more fulfilling, because the other part of it is you're the one who gets to live with whatever it takes to get that success. And once you have the success, you're the one who really gets to enjoy it. So you might as well enjoy as much of it as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, how does your role, your role, you know, what does intuition, what part does it play in your role as a mom,
Mm.
so as a businesswoman?
Yes, great question. So I use it very much for decision making. And not every single decision am I listening to my intuition for consciously,
Mhm.
but it's always there. And what I find is it keeps me on what I would call the true path to myself, because every single person on earth, we all have intuition. Whether or not you listen to it a lot, it's still always there. If you have a brain, you have intuition. And some people call it a gut feeling or just a hunch. One of the reasons I mentioned the brain is sometimes when people look at intuition, they look at the right side of the brain, and it's the part of the brain that makes conclusions very quickly, but it doesn't have a logical reason for why there are those conclusions that it made. And so your left brain or your logical mind, it has the logical reasons for why we do things. But your intuition, that's just your knowing of, oh, this is a good person, or this is a good business deal, or this is a good decision for my life. I find the more that you listen to it, it lets you stay true to yourself, because it's your own body and mind's way of seeing the world and making decisions that are true to you. And so I find the more that you listen to it, your life can keep on unfolding in this way, that it's always keeping your best interests at mind and keeping your success. And it helps me to, some of the easy ways is like, I just find if I feel drawn to work with somebody for a podcast or as a partnership or as a client, and my intuition says yes, that's always so much better than when my intuition feels weird about it. There inevitably are problems in one way or another when my intuition is feeling uncomfortable about a person. And so it makes life more enjoyable and things flow more smoothly.
Yeah, and you experienced this obviously with the car accident, isn't it? You know, tell us a
Yes.
bit about that.
Yes. So I, several years ago, this was before I was officially owning the fact that I had psychic ability. I was downplaying it for the most part. And I had a premonition that I was going to get in a car accident that day with my family. And then I thought, no, no, I don't want that to happen. I don't want to think about that. And then right before the car accident happened, seconds before it happened, I knew it was going to happen.
Gosh.
And later I talked to my husband about it, and I said, "Oh, well, it was really obvious with how the cars were on the road." He said, no, that wasn't obvious at all. And they hit us from behind. So I hadn't seen anything. I just knew the feeling several seconds before it happened. And that day I realized, okay, I have a gift. I need to recognize this. I need to stop downplaying this. And then I prayed and I said, okay, why do I have this gift? Like, what is the purpose of this? Because it didn't save me from the car accident, so that feels inconvenient. And luckily no one was hurt in the car accident. And we had some scratches and bumps and the car was totaled, but overall, it was mostly a fender bender. And so the answer I got from my intuition or God or my higher self was, if you can help other people to avoid pain and problems and accidents, then working with your gift and working with them can help them to have a better life, to avoid the pains that we don't have to experience. And to me, that felt like a very hopeful message. And so some of the people who come to me, they more want just the pure coaching side of how do I move forward and how do I work with my thoughts. And the benefit of my psychic intuitive gifts is I can usually, or not usually, I can pinpoint what is the thing that's holding them back. Sometimes it's a trauma from childhood, or sometimes it's just a belief that you have adopted, maybe about, oh, successful moms don't do XYZ. Well, this unconscious belief is holding you back and you don't even know. And so I tell people what I see is holding them back. And then typically I also receive the information for them of, is there a method you can do to work with this? Is there self-talk that you can do? And what kind of personal growth modality or tools are going to help you to break through that so that you can, avoid the pain and the hardship and have more successes.
Mm. And do you generally work with just mums then, or do you work with, anybody, even if they're not a mum?
Work with anyone, even if they're not a mom. I do tend to work with a lot of moms, and it might be because that's the stage of life that I'm in.
Yeah.
And a lot of the business women that I'm around are also moms. Not everyone, but it is quite common. And I also I don't share a lot about my kids online. So nobody would ever be like, oh, she's a mommy blogger or a mom influencer. Because I like to keep their life private.
Mhm.
Just that's my own personal preference. But I do, when I'm talking with people or writing my emails, I will talk about parenting at times because it is a big part of our lives. But yes, I work with mostly women, but men come to me too. Maybe 20% of the people who work with me are men, and a lot of the women are moms, but not everyone.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I, you've got such a mix of things, and obviously you've got your book as well, which where can people get that, and what is the basis? I know you've referenced this earlier, but if you can just remind me
Yes,
about your book.
sure. Thank you. So the book is called Talk to the Trees, and the subtitles Wake Up to Wisdom, Wonder, and Calm. And it's a way of tuning into calm and peace and self-love, getting that feeling that you may get walking through a park or a forest. And it's written with the perspective of the trees. So the trees sharing about how do they deal with pain? How do they deal with life's challenges? And then at the end of every chapter, there's a practice for you to try, something to journal about or something to meditate. And people have told me it's so magical. And one of the other reasons people love it is, so I like to say trees, they can be your life coach. And they're a life coach that if you drive anywhere or walk anywhere with trees, there you go. There's another life coach for you right there on the side of the road. And so a lot of people I know, myself included, we use trees as a mindful reminder of, you see a beautiful tree, you remember to pause and think about how that tree's living its best life. Can you feel self-love? Can you feel calm? Can you let yourself live your best self, your best life? And so it's really a sweet way of bringing in both attention to the natural world, which always makes people feel better, and more self-love and peace for yourself. And it's available on Amazon, on any of the Amazon platforms, whatever country you're in. And occasionally people will ask me to sign a copy and mail that to them. So I can do that for a small extra fee. And it's also listed on my website, rachelstrivelli.com, if people want to go there.
No, that's fantastic. It's made me now. I'm going to be checking it out as well, because it's just, the whole thing with the connection and sort of positive affirmations and stuff like that. I think because people are doing that a lot nowadays, and it is important to kind of like adopt and have that as part of your daily rituals. So yeah, no, so it sounds a really brilliant book. So moving on from your book, I know you mentioned you don't tend to post about your children, but also from the mum perspective, you've also had a challenge, during one of your children. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes. So a lot of parents can relate to kids having sleep issues. And my son had a sleep issue from when he was born. But when a child is a baby, you don't really think a lot about it. Most people say, "Oh, they'll grow out of it." Well, I kept on hearing he'll grow out of it for 3 years. I read every sleep book that was at the library, which was about 12 sleep books. I tried everything I could try, and it wasn't getting better. And we got on the wait list for a pediatric sleep doctor. However, this person is in such high demand, it was a year-long wait list. And meanwhile, my son would periodically wake up at 3 a.m. and be awake for the day. And he was a toddler, so someone had to be up with him, and that was me. And my husband had a regular job. And the other benefit of business was, if I needed to, I could, shut down for 2 weeks or a month and tell my clients, "Hey, I'm going through this. Can we reschedule?" Or, "Here are the times I can fit in another spot with you." Everyone that I worked with was really understanding, and I didn't have to cancel on people. Almost never did I cancel. We would reschedule occasionally, but I also, when things would get really tough, I would think, okay, one of the reasons I'm in business for myself is so that I can work with the life that I have. And so I would take a month off. I'd close my calendar, not take on new clients. And this was also before I officially was recognizing that I wasn't intuitive, that I was a psychic. I was just calling myself a life coach. And in looking to get resources for my child that I could get while we waited for a year to see the sleep doctor, I started looking at alternative medicine, alternative modalities. And what I found was, it taught me about me. I realized, oh, I'm getting the same information this Reiki healer's getting, who's helping my son, but I don't really, the words are slightly different, but the meaning is the same. And so it let me more uncover knowledge of myself. I truly feel that I wouldn't be on the path that I am today if it wasn't for my son. And he even told me in a dream once about how he was going to change the path of my life. When you're in the midst of a change, you're like, oh, great. some of these paths kids can send us on, it's like, wow, I didn't think I signed up for this, but here we are. And I kept on trying to look at, how can I maintain good self-care? How can I be, to me, I wanted to not be a mom who was yelling as much as possible. And I realized, oh, if I was yelling a lot, then that for me was my sign. My self-care is not where it needs to be, because I'm essentially taking it out on my family and I'm not able to handle my frustrations. And it was a very, very frustrating circumstance because I was losing sleep multiple nights a week. And this had been going on for years, and my whole circadian rhythm was off. but I just realized, okay, I need to do all the self-care that I can. And I was in a coaching program that felt very healing. And I was learning from spiritual teachers. I was in some spiritual programs. And so I was really making sure that even though my sleep was not doing the greatest in some ways, that every area of life that I could support myself and everything I could do, I could do. Because during the pandemic, it wasn't, you couldn't, also, you couldn't just go out and get things.
No.
And so, or I couldn't find a babysitter. We went through 10 babysitters in a year because he also had behavior issues that the sleep issues worsened. And so babysitters would come one time and never come back. And so I had to keep on maintaining my sanity throughout all of this in the best way that I could. And little things like looking at trees or putting I have all these rainbow catchers in the windows so that I'd see a rainbow on the floor. And I'd think, okay, I can feel good for a few more minutes because there's a rainbow. Or I can admire the tree and think trees have withstood year after year of all kinds of things. I can withstand this. And I really just practiced so much positive self-talk, and I kept on trying to be as compassionate with myself as possible. And like I said, it was not pleasant to go through, but it felt that it was this transformation that happened because I didn't, even though sometimes I was angry at him, I really worked to, okay, I don't want to harbor resentment. I need to let that go.
Yeah, it sounds definitely like a massive challenge. And one of my guests was speaking about the sleep deprivation and talking about how it feels like permanent jet lag. So it's I completely you're not sleeping and everything. And but I like the fact that you did control the things you could and focused on your own self-care and learning about you as a person, because I think we can overlook that and forget to look at us and just look at the problem or what we're dealing with at the moment. So that's really incredible, and some good sort of tips really for somebody else who's going through a challenge and feels they can't do any more than what they're already doing. So now that's absolutely brilliant. But it's been really, really good and great to hear about, obviously, the psychic side of things and how you're using that, obviously, with your coaching. If you can remind the audience where they can find you again, if they want to work with you.
Yes. So you can find me. I'm on most of the social media platforms almost every day, but not always. And that's at Rachel Strivelli on all of those. And then my website is rachelstrivelli.com. And I email out, it's called Friday for Ray. It's 4 new ways of looking at the world. And I send that out every Friday. And these are similar to, I talked about trees being your life coach. It's a little moment of looking at the world in a new way to bring some more light and happiness and wonder to your life.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. You've been an incredible guest, and thank you for sharing all that with us today.
You're welcome, Esther. You ask great questions. It has been a delight to be here.